Now we've got a basic setup for the control, a basic setup for the ball. What's the next thing we want to do? Let's see. I think this. I might want to move the camera. I'm gonna just reorganize things a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna move the I think the camera is a little bit too close, so you can't see much. So we're gonna move the camera back, and let's just do this the easy way for now. I'm gonna simply pull the camera back on its Z-axis. You can see that as I do that, it changes it moves away from the objects, and then they become a bit smaller. And I'm just gonna sort of reposition it so it gives us more space at the top. Right. I think let's go with something like that. Okay, and then another thing we need to have is we need to have these bars at the upper part of the screen when you play, more of a breakout setup. So since I have this player bar working, I might just duplicate this and remove the interaction. Actually, I think any cube would work. Let's try that. So let's just create a cube and let's reposition it. Okay, obviously we don't want it to be there, so I'm going to move it up a bit. And then scale. Press R, go to the scale tool, and then just scale up on the x-axis. I'm going to move this, change this to a round number. Okay. So I'm going to say this is a 4. And let's just put a few of these so that we make sure that we block this way, so the ball will always hit at least one of them. Let's see if how we can best do that. There is a shortcut for you to duplicate an item, just Control D or Command D. So if you do that, it's going to create a duplicate. Let me just undo that and pay attention to this area. Command D, Control D, and you can see that there's another one being created, and it's going to be created at the same spot, so you can't actually see it in the scene until you start moving it. And now you can see that there are actually 2 objects there. So let's just do that a few times. All right, so duplicate, move. Okay, let's see if that works. Oh, guess we need one more at the end here, just to make sure it's capture everything. And I'm gonna move the camera back a little bit more, just for now, so we can see if this is working. Okay, good. So it is working. It's reacting. The ball is reacting to the colliders, the cube colliders. Okay, so that's good. Let's spread this one out a bit. Okay, and I'm going to move the camera up again, just so that it looks more like what we'd expect. Just by you can adjust the view just by repositioning your camera. I think that's roughly alright. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want the bars to disappear when they are hit by the ball, right? Just that's the behavior we expect in a breakout game. So in order to do, there are several different ways to do that across multiple objects, right? Because we want that same interaction on all of the bars that we're going to create, and there are multiple ways to do it. What I am going to show you now is the concept of a prefab. So a prefab is, well, let me think of a good way to put it. A prefab is basically an object that's saved in a system that you can reuse. So you can reuse the same object over and over again, and it's always going to be the same. Well, 90% of the time, it's 90% of it, it's going to be the same. So think of it as a cookie cutter, right? So whenever you use the cookie cutter, you're going to end up with the same shape. The cookie is always going to have the same shape. So it's kind of a similar idea, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So first of all, let's remove most of these. Let's just hit Control Delete, Command Delete, remove them, and start with just one. Now let's go to the project view, and I'm going to create a folder called Prefabs, and that's where I'm going to store all my prefabs. And again, prefabs is just a term for these things that you can continue to reuse, right? And how do you create a prefab? Very easy. You just drag this object into the project view, and now you can see that there's a bar prefab. And if you look at this file name down here, it's got a .prefab extension, which means this is a prefab. And also, if you change the view to a list view, it's going to have this sort of blue cube icon. And regardless of what the object is, it's going to have that icon. Okay, so that's good. And you can also see that it's kind of subtle, but the tags on the file name has changed to a dark blue text color. And that also indicates that this is now connected to a prefab. So this object in the hierarchy is connected to the prefab in the project. Okay, so another thing that you notice is now this object has this line here that says prefab, and then select, revert, apply. If you go to any other object that's not connected to a prefab, it wouldn't have that line. So there you have the prefab line, there you don't. And this is a quick way for you to find, okay, if you click on select, it will automatically select the prefab that this object is connected to. So let's try this. Okay, so delete this object here. And don't worry, we have a copy of it down here. So there's no bar object in the scene. Now you can just drag and drop this into the scene. Now you have a bar, and you can just keep doing that and keep creating multiple objects like that, multiple bars from that. So essentially you've created an asset that represents the object that you've created in the scene. And the cool thing about this is, let's say if I make changes to this prefab, then the changes will also apply to the objects that are connected to this prefab. So for example, let's see what I want to do with this prefab here. Well, since we are going to create some interactions for it, we might as well add a playmaker component. Right, so let's add the playmaker FSM. So this is the same as going to playmaker and right click and then add FSM. But make sure that you have the prefab selected instead of one of these. And you can see that as soon as we added this component, this playmaker component, all the ones up here have that playmaker icon, which means they are now also playmaker objects. They've all now have this component added to them. See, they all have this now. If I go back to the bar prefab and remove this, all of a sudden none of these will have that playmaker component. So that's the idea of a prefab, is you can use the prefab to duplicate objects in any scene, and changes made to the prefabs are going to apply to all the objects connected to it. Okay, now let's add that back because we do want the playmaker component on it. Okay, and let's just call this destroy on hit. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit too descriptive, but I think let's go with that for now. Click on Edit, go to your Playmaker tab. Okay, now make sure that this says prefab on it, because if you make changes to the individual objects here instead of the prefab, then the other ones won't have the changes you made. So make sure when you make changes to prefabs, you are making changes to the prefab. When you want to make changes that applies to all objects connected to a prefab, make changes to the prefab itself. Okay, and we're just gonna say have the idle state, which is basically saying don't do anything. And then we add a hit state. So when this bar is hit, we do something to it. And we're going to add a transition. And we're going to just do collision enter. And then drag that to the hit state. And what we want to do here is we want to destroy self. Right, so there's this action called destroy self, and all it does is destroying this object. And that's it. Now I'm seeing some errors. Let's see what we have. Missing target state. Okay, so these are old errors, I think. Yeah. Okay, so once that prefab, so we made changes to the prefab, and you can see that all these objects now have this playmaker component, and they all have the same state machine design in it. And you can tell that these are not the prefabs by looking at this thing here. It says prefab instance instead of prefab. So if you see this, whenever you see this this phrase prefab instance, make sure you go to select prefab and make changes there. Otherwise, the changes you made will only apply to one particular object. Okay, so let's see if that works. Let's hit play. Let's hope it hits something. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now you can see that when the ball hits the bar just simply destroys itself. Okay, that's good. I like that effect. Now let's just do a little bit of experiment. Now another thing with prefab is you don't always have to drag this into the scene. You can also just duplicate any objects that's connected to a prefab, or you can just call them prefab instances. You can just duplicate them by using. You can always do Control-C, Control-V, move it, or do what we did earlier, Control-D or Command-D. So I'm just gonna start making a whole bunch of these, just randomly. It doesn't have to be any order to it. And being a bit slow, so you can also hold down Shift and select a whole bunch of objects at a time. So click on one object, hold down Shift, click on the other one, and it will select everything in between. And I'm gonna just duplicate this whole thing, all the objects here. So Control-D and move them up like that. Okay, I think that's enough objects for us to destroy, and enough bars for us to destroy. So let's play this and see how that works. Okay, so slight problem here, as you can see that the ball is flying off the screen. So we need to set a boundary here. I was gonna do that later, but since we're experiencing this problem, let's fix that now. So save the project, and let's create a boundary there, right? So how do we do that? Well, it's simple, because now we know that the ball will come back whenever it hits something. So all we need to do is just creating a wall here, and then it should theoretically come back, right? So let's create a cube. I'm going to call this wall, and let's see where it is. Okay, so I'm going to reset it and move it to the left-hand side. Now you can always do this and look at it from the back. And I'm going to scale it all the way up and move it up a bit. Maybe something like that. Bring it closer. Okay, so I'm going to, so you can see that it's over there. Just to be safe, I'm going to scale it on the z-axis, just so that it's a little bit bigger that way. But then I don't want it to sort of affect. Actually, it might be kind of cool. You can see that visually it gives you like an interesting effect on the scene as well. So I'm going to keep that. Okay. Now let's duplicate that wall and then move it to the other side. Okay, let's save that and hit play. Now you can see that the ball is attached. It's just not bouncing off the wall. And why was that? Let's try that again. I have an idea why that's happening, but that's let's see how we can find out exactly what's happening. Right. So again, it's going that way, and let's wait until it hits the wall. Well, so far so good. It's not, we're not seeing that bug again, but we should see it again fairly soon. You can see that when the ball is changing direction on the x-axis away from the wall, catch that, doesn't have any problem. But okay, now we're seeing the problem. Let's pause it and click on the ball and let's try to find out what's going on here. All right, so let's click on the ball and go to Playmaker. All right, sometimes it doesn't show up. Just select the ball again if you have a problem. And let's see what's going on. So you can see that it's currently paused and the ball is in the move state. Right. And let's see, it's got the -3 on the x-axis and the -3 on the y-axis. So that means it's trying to move down and at the same time trying to move left. And that creates a problem for us, because if the ball keeps trying to go left, it's going to keep bumping into this wall and it wouldn't bounce off the wall. Right. So we're going to need some logic to tell the ball, well, if you hit the wall on the left, always go right. If you hit the wall on the right, always go left, instead of randomly pick one of these two directions, go to as we have designed earlier. Right. So let's do that next.